What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Fantasy Golf Bag Podcast. I'm your host, Redkacheek from fantasygolfbag.com, and today we'll be previewing the RBC Heritage at Harbour Town Golf Links. I'll quickly touch on the Masters. I don't have much to say besides a couple congratulations and a couple sorries, I guess. First off, big shout out to Nelson, who runs Cut Sweats. Played golf with him once here in Florida, and been in his DMs, picking his brain on a few things over the years. Very, very nice guy. Can come across as a dick from time to time on Twitter, but that's the nature of the beast online. So very happy for him to win the Millie Maker. Had a good run in the 3K Millie Maker as well. And I think he was probably profitable in the $10 barely, if I recall correctly. But obviously, none of that matters when you bink the Millie Maker in the $100. So congrats to him. We were doing some research in the Discord, the Fantasy Golf Bag Discord, looking at not even just his top lineup, but kind of his exposures overall. And you can do that. If you go into LineupIQ and go back to the Masters on Thursday and click the main slate, you can review any of the Millie Makers contests. You can run your own sims in those contests. For like a post-lock sim look, and then any of the other contests, you can look at entries and get a feel for like ownership and stuff like that. So what we looked at was basically the players he was most overweight on and most underweight on. And without going down that route too in depth here, his biggest fades were like the really chalky values, if you will. He was slightly underweight on Rahm, who was kind of a sticking point, especially for us here. We didn't play much Bryson, so we got lucky there, I guess, but definitely did not prioritize Scheffler, which arguably is probably the right play at his price, and we definitely didn't prioritize Rory as much as we obviously should have. But then his other plays, he was way underweight on like Minwoo Lee, and there was a couple other stronger chalk plays that he was underweight on. His big overweights were really like Rory, and there was a couple guys that were, 7%, 10%, and he was like 3x the field. So he definitely took some hard stances there. And I will say, looking at some of the other lineups in that contest with some other good pros, Peter Gibbons was one, and Need Lunch Money, who had a episode on, I'm drawing a blank on this podcast, but you can look up Need Lunch Money, I think, and find it on Spotify or Apple. He has a show from a couple of years ago. I'll also say is another really good player. He's a professional. He does this for a living, and he had completely opposite exposures. So you can take that for what you will. There's obviously no right or wrong until after the fact, right? You look back at it and it makes total sense. But if you were overweight on a few guys that kind of bombed out, try not to be too critical. There's a lot of different ways to skin a cat there. The other interesting one was Pot Guider, which I talked about in the Wednesday night live stream, who completely just blew up. And if you look at Nelson's exposures, he actually had Rory paired with Pot Guider in 50% of his lineups. 50% of the lineups with Rory had Pot Guider. So again, it only takes one. He obviously had a great pool anyways. He faded the right, Minwoo Lee chalk. It obviously worked out very well. So a good tool, though, to go back and look at LineupIQ and see some of the guys. We have a list in our Discord for like the top guys to look at each week if you want to kind of compare your exposures to theirs and maybe reason with why they were way overweight, underweight, or it might be enlightening to see how they match the field on most players anyway, especially the top guys. So with that being said, again, congrats to Nelson. The sorry again is just like Rory. I did not expect, and honestly, it's hard to really derive it. Like we have the leaderboard up and the strokes gained stuff from the Masters, and he obviously did a lot of work on the greens and around the greens. So you could argue maybe, with how he drove the ball so crooked for a majority of the event. I mean, he was gaining strokes off the tee purely from distance, and his accuracy was not good. You could argue that was a good play, and it didn't work out. Obviously he won, so it didn't work out, but there's some different arguments you can be made looking at the data leading in for Rory. Obviously him winning last year took a big load off of his shoulders for pressure. So is what it is. happy for, I wouldn't say I'm happy for Rory. Congrats to Rory is what it is. So with that being said, let's just go ahead and transition into RBC Heritage. So as always, we're waiting on a few. I'll look at the field and tee times really quick. We got live loaded as well. You can go into FGB Studio and run some live models. We updated some of the, I'll look at that really quickly. So if you go to like Rom, for example, and go to his player profile, this week for live, and I almost, people get a stick up their ass on live, which is fair in a sense, but like, I mean, it is what it is. People bet it. For us, obviously it's not a priority, but we have the data available. So what we updated this week was for the players on the PGA Tour or live, the course history now reflects the course, even going back to PGA Tour data. So you can see here for live at Club de Golf Chapultepec, Rom has obviously had a pretty good history there. Terrell Hatton as well. So a nice feature as you go down into here. And we also have some new DFS data, which we may or may not get to today, for like ownership trends, salary trends, etc. So let's head back to the tournament field for the RBC Heritage. So looking at the players, the past couple winners here, we got JT, Scotty Scheffler, Matt Fitzpatrick, and Jordan Spieth. The last 4 winners are in the field. You can look at their course history leading into it, prior to their wins. And obviously for a lot of these guys, like especially with good top 10 finishes, there's a lot of good course history around this. Like Russell Henley's interesting. He only has missed cuts in top 20s basically, or top 10s. Same with Fitzpatrick, a couple missed cuts earlier in his career, some decent finishes, a win, and then some really mediocre finishes. So again, a nice, easy reference. This is free as well, to look through all the players, their course history. And Patrick Cantlay here with a bunch of top 10s and then a T13, 1 missed cut. So interesting course history, right? We talked about that last week with the Masters as far as what is course history worth. When you consider the best players tend to perform well there anyways, is course history really the factor? And a guy like Patrick Cantlay is interesting. Like he missed the cut in 21. I'm sure people were on him. And you look at T3, T7, T3, missed cut, second place, third place, T3. I would argue that's really good course history. 1 missed cut kind of doesn't negate that. And I don't think that's news to anybody. But like Daniel Berger's got pretty good course history through there. Brian Harmon as well. Andrew Novak, second place last year, which is interesting considering he's known for being kind of long and does well in the longer tracks. Yo Hisasuni's probably going to be pretty popular this week. Sung J M has really good history here outside of the 2 missed cuts he started with. JT Poston, etc. And JT Poston's another example. Basically top 10 or missed cut. Like it's kind of wild. But let's hop into the course summary. And I think you'll find this is probably one of the most predictive tracks in terms of like a skill set discrepancy. The way I phrase that is intentional because if you look through our correlations, especially in the last 12 months, 9 months, 2 years, all of like basically the best players in field adjusted total strokes gained or strokes gained tee to green, both are very, very, very similar. Putting is nowhere to be seen here. It's really just tee to green, which is a big chunk of total strokes gained, to be honest. And it's typically most stable. I think most people know that. But you can see like this is very high correlation numbers. So like basically Spectrum shows up here number 1, which is nice to see. That is the most predictive stat for this event. But all in all, this is miles higher than even the Masters with a limited field, and not half, 10 or 20 guys probably are out of it and destined to be dead last anyway. So really good modeling when we go into FGB Studio here in just a moment. But let's talk about the golf course just a little bit, and I'll take myself off for now. So yeah, everyone knows about Harbour Town. We know it's, par 71, 7,200 yards. The big thing with Harbour Town is everyone knows how tight it is with the dog legs. Driving is difficult. That makes green irregulation difficult. And arguably, it's fairly long. Like for a par 71 and how they have to play this golf course, it is pretty long. And you'll see that in the approach numbers. But there's plenty of holes that are, basically everything plays to level par. Par 5s play a little bit under par. No surprise if you guys have been following the show for, a couple months or a couple years. Number 9, the par 4 plays about a quarter of a shot under par. And again, 15, the par 5 plays slightly under par. All in all, this is a pretty, I want to say, a simple track. I mean, it does play to a field score of about half a shot under par. So not a difficult track by any means, but it does seem that way off the tee. The way you could pretty much be in jail if you don't drive it well. That sets up the entire golf course. And we see that with like the green and regulation rate being lower, which we'll get into here now. I guess we'll jump into it. So one of the interesting dynamics I'd like to talk about is driving, because I think as a player, or, as we kind of model out a field anyways and kind of feel who should do well here, or how the course should play, at least, the driving accuracy and driving distance number is a really interesting dynamic, where a course like this, where you would say, man, it's the fairways are narrow, it's tree lined, dog leggy, driving is really, a key. Like hitting a fairway is really important because it's hard to do, right? And you look at the driving accuracy number being 5% higher than the tour average, and that correlates with the driving distance being 10 yards below the tour average. And what does that say? Basically, these guys will prioritize hitting fairways into their spots over driving distance, and that's no surprise to anybody listening. Distance penalty is slightly up, which is really interesting. I view that really, it's really interesting, because I think there's a way for you to lay back and hit some fairways. And by you giving up, let's say 20 yards of distance, you make your second shots way more difficult. And that shows in this distance penalty here. So like driving accuracy is up. Yes. That doesn't mean it's easier to hit fairways. It just is, guys prioritize hitting more fairways than basically full ripping drivers. And again, no surprise to anybody listening. The distance penalty is interesting though, because you think about driving distance as not a big factor here, which it isn't strictly from an off the tee perspective. But if you're laying back a bit too conservatively, the distance penalty is up, and you're going to have, 10 or 20 yards longer into most of those par 4s. That's going to add up over the course of, possibly just 36 holes, but certainly over 72 holes. Missed fairway penalty is down. A lot of that is due to the green and regulation rate is already pretty low with the longer approach shots. So looking at approach, these are the buckets. 175 to 200 is about 30% of the approach shots, 23% over 200. And a lot of that, if you go back up here, is the par 3s. You can see this par 3, number 4 is 200 yards, number 7, 217, number 14, 192, and number 17, 198. That's on the scorecard. So a lot of the distance there in that 175 to 200 plus bucket is just the par 3s, but a good chunk of those second shots on those par 4s. There's a handful, you'll see it right here. We're going down. A handful of wedges, right? 125 to 150, 150 to 175. But again, a lot in that 175 to 225 bucket, we'll call it. 175 to 210, maybe. Driving distance, I don't know if there's anything else here. Greens regulation, yeah, slightly lower than the tour average. No surprise there. Missed green regulation penalty a little bit lower than the tour average. So again, there's not as much of a penalty. It's basically tour average, but not as much of a penalty to miss the green here, mainly because you're not making a lot more birdies just by hitting the greens. You're basically just making par, and the guys missing the greens are going to, basically average 0.7 strokes over par on each of their greens and regulation missed. Let's see. Birdie or better, bogey or worse. Bogey or worse a little bit higher, no surprise. Birdie or better is actually a little bit higher, which kind of makes sense from the greens perspective. The par 5s are very scoreable. But if you have, if you hit the greens here, you usually have a pretty short, reasonably short putt, relatively flat. The birdie or better rate, is basically tour average, which is, again, just trying to paint a picture of green regulation is lower. Okay. The green regulation penalty is not higher than the tour average. Okay. That's that means like the green regulation isn't as big of a factor in the tournament. And then also the birdie or better rate's higher because if you're going to hit greens and hit it, within 20 feet, you got a reasonable chance to make that versus any other PGA Tour course. All right, driving distances. This first chart here on the left is just the driver profile. Again, not too surprising considering the golf course layout, but year over year, it obviously favors accuracy. So anyone that comes in here with a lot of distance and a little bit crooked, they're not going to do as well as someone being a little bit shorter off the tee and a little bit more accurate. And again, that's year over year outside of 2023, 2022 back, 2021, again, strongly favors accuracy. So nothing too surprising with the year over year accuracy versus distance chart. Driving distance, again, looking at the par fours and par fives. This is the breakout. 270 to 290, we got 9 tee shots, and you can look at this hole by hole, all around 270 to 278, pretty much. So again, that's mostly 3 wood. Some guys are hitting, a 2-iron or a hybrid. 270 nowadays on the PGA Tour, with the courses being somewhat firm, are falling into that bucket. Certainly not driver heavy. 250 to 270, we have 3 tee shots. 230 to 250, that is hole 13. 248, 241 off the tee. You got 1 there. And then 1 hole, hole 15, the par 5, averages 290. Again, not straightaway bombs. It's 290 on all the par 5s on the PGA Tour. That is probably the shortest of any par 5 driving distance for the field average. All right, we got a couple other charts here I won't get into, basically just kind of mapping out other similar courses for driving accuracy, driving distance, difficulty of hitting the fairways, the approach distance buckets we just kind of talked about. Really just kind of the mid to long irons. Nowadays, 175 up is essentially a mid iron. Call that like, 8.7, 8.76, and then probably 5 irons, 200 plus. This is up there as far as difficulty of hitting green. Definitely one of the tougher golf courses. Caves Valley is very similar. Memorial Park Golf Course, surprisingly, is very similar. And Torrey Pines North Course is similar. And I think that is pretty much it. Some course comps, we have East Lake, Country Club of Jackson. Just in terms, it's all over the place, but really just looking at the driving importance, fairway distance, and green regulation importance and green regulation difficulty. That is where you'll see like East Lake is number 2 here, and it's not a perfect overlap, but you can see most of these are directionally close as far as like the proximity difficulty, distance is similar, fairway difficulty, green regulation difficulty, all pretty similar. A little bit more difficult than East Lake, but all in all, very similar golf course from that aspect. We got the prior winners, etc. So to keep this moving, I went ahead and ran kind of our default model, if you will. It's basically taking in all of those lead-in stats we just briefly talked about with the field adjusted strokes gained total, spectrum, tee to green. I think bogey or worse showed up here in a couple of the time frames, but this is basically what we ran for RBC Heritage, and this is one of our stronger models for a golf event year over year. So again, I'm not going to spend too much time on this show. I think the Masters hangover is real. We did see a couple contests on DraftKings get re-added or basically duplicated. So I'll just quickly talk through the guys that kind of pop here, which is no surprise. So like one of those things, we can do a share. Let's see if that shows decent. No, not good enough. Seeing if it could show me the top 10 really easily. But yeah, I mean, if we go by pricing on DK, really everybody in this top 10, it's top 10, top 7, whatever. Outside of a few people kind of moving a little bit up or a little bit down, like Cameron Young's 2 at 9,800 versus Tommy Fleetwood is 5th in this model at 10-1. All these guys are pretty much in the same category. Like I would argue all these guys are similar ranked compared to their price. Nobody really stands out. And honestly, as you go down, like Siwoo Kim has a really good rating at 8,900. If we just sort by rating and go down, like there's really no one. We got JJ Spawn at 7,500. I don't see anybody in the 6Ks that pop up, which is probably a good sign for a good model because that aligns with what Vegas thinks anyways, or at least what DraftKings thinks for pricing. JJ Spawn at 7,500, ranked 13th. Akshay Bhatia 7,700. Yo Hisasuni 7,700. And all those guys are probably going to be pretty popular. So nothing really outlandish here, if you will. Now, the guys that will be a difference maker is kind of going against the narrative of driving distance versus accuracy. So you think about Nikolai Hogard, Corey Connors off of a miscut. Like I would argue Nikolai Hogard is probably a good GPP play. Coming off that, he's going to be extremely low owned at a decent price versus Hisatsuni. Probably going to be the chalk du jour this week. Corey Connors probably going to get some, maybe a flop lag spot for Minwoo Lee, who does have really bad course history. But again, trying to weigh that in like LineupIQ when we run the sims, the ownership's going to shake out. So again, I'll kind of breeze through the top price guys really quickly and just kind of hit on guys that stand out to me, I guess, outside of the rankings, because I'll follow this pretty closely. Sam Burns was interesting last week as like a buy low spot at 9K. We could look at his results from the Masters here. So you can see we got Spectrum as well. We can look at off the tee was much better than what Strokes Gained showed. And then Spectrum approach was lower than what Strokes Gained approach showed. Putting was really good. Looking at his course history, it's kind of all over the place. I would feel like this is a good spot if he's, going to be low teens ownership, jumping off ship here for Sam Burns, because he wasn't really on the radar, to be completely honest, last week. It was more so a GPP play, a guy that was underpriced. A lot of times when he's played well, it hasn't really been for any particular reason outside of like the Valspar year over year has played well there. And you could argue maybe this has some carryover to Valspar. And it probably does a little bit, but I think that's probably the one that I would follow suit with versus some of the other ones priced around him. Like Cantley's got great course history, looked to play better last week, at least over the weekend. Morikawa, assuming he doesn't withdraw, I'll keep going back there until people start giving him more faith, I guess. 9,300 for him. I mean, in a normal year, he would be priced up above Xander possibly, or at least between, Fitzpatrick and Xander in the 10K range. So I definitely think there's still value there, and his ownership won't catch up. Let's see. Siwoo Kim I like. I think McIntyre is probably a jump off spot as well. Hovland, not a huge fan here. Does grade out pretty well. I'm curious what his course history is because I don't know it off the top of my head. Moderate. I mean, honestly, in a signature event like last year, T13, okay. But, it's pretty impressive gaining 3 strokes off the tee there. T21, T59, T13. And then looking at last week, pretty good with the irons, honestly. Yeah, I'll at least be lower on Hovland at 8,600. Going down a little bit, Bridgman's a good spot to come back to. Goddard, I don't think this is probably the best course for Goddard. It doesn't grade out well anyways, but he does seem to surprise us more times than not. Substraka, I do like that. He's 24th here at 7,900. I like going back to Substraka for this golf course. Like I said, Minwoo Lee doesn't have great course history and off a miscut last week. That's a tough dynamic, which we just talked about a little bit. And I'll go down to the DFS history. So this is our momentum chart. And it looks a little bit busy. It'll probably take another video to like summarize this. If you're listening, this probably won't be super helpful, but you can see like the trends of ownership tracking with salary. So like as he has a good finish, his price starts to go up, his ownership starts to flow with it. And you can see that kind of peak right after the Texas Children's Houston Open, right? Finished T3. his price dropped quite a bit. His ownership still stayed high, and he scored 11 DK points last week. So looking through this on how like the ownership tracks, we'll see where his ownership comes in this week, and at his price and salary, even despite his terrible course history, might be a chance to get a very low owned Min-Woo Lee. I'm hoping that's the case. Otherwise, in a vacuum single entry, there's nothing to really like about Min-Woo Lee. But again, we're competing against a lot of people, and they all have the same ideas. Would not argue against that at all. Let's see here. Yeah, ironically enough, when his ownership starts to go up, his DK points go up. We're trying to do a dynamic with salary as well, and that's really this momentum chart. So let's go back over here. Ben Griffin pretty much out on it, 7,800. Ricky Fowler is a really good spot here, 7,600. He's 22nd in this FGB Studio model. I think Ricky Fowler's going to be a good play most weeks on the PGA Tour. He seems to be coming into good form. His last 9 months and 12 months, he's in the top 13, top 11. His last couple events have dropped him a little bit, but I think this is a good get right spot for Ricky Fowler. So like that quite a bit. JJ Spawn, we'll see what the ownership shakes out to. I probably want to be underweight for JJ. Coming off his win, we'll wait till like we get to the U.S. Open and see how he's starting to play. Gerard should be a really good play at 7,400. Sudarshan Yelamaraju, 25th overall. If we take out basically the last 12 months, which he doesn't have a lot of data anyways, I mean, he's been one of the best. And honestly, if we average this out, which I want to use some bigger sample, he would be closer like 14th or so in this field, and he's 7,200. Again, ownership's going to go along with that, so keep an eye on that. LineupIQ does a lot of that work for you with the field sims, but in a vacuum, good play. Sudarshan playing great. We can pull him up really quick. So you can see here, I mean, really pretty strong. T17, T5, T6. T5 at the Players, 2 weeks later at the Houston Open, T6. Yeah, this is a good player, good spot. I kind of like his fit here, but I'm afraid he's going to be 20% owned. So we will see. Let's see here. JT Poston's an interesting one. So that would be one, again, from a game theory perspective. We just talked about his course history being all over the place. No one's going to be interested to click JT Poston. That's, he ranks poorly in this anyways. That would be a spot where I would be a little bit more comfortable to be like 2x the field, assuming he's like 5 to 7% owned. And maybe I'm wrong. He could be, 7 to 10%, and that changes things a little bit. But I think Poston on a course like this, where we see like the ebbs and flows of the course history, some top finishes, miscuts, top finishes, I'm willing to kind of catch a falling knife there for him. Some other good plays there, Sam Stevens. I'm honestly not afraid of Michael Thorbjornsen either at 7,300. Like we think about him as like the bomber, going to do well, but we've seen guys play well here with distance and they can tame it down. Like I think there's a really good opportunity for a guy like Thorbjornsen to get forgotten in this low 7K range. So like that quite a bit as well. Corey Connors, I kind of tipped to already. Go right back to him here. Let's see. Max Homa, how did he look? Obviously, he finished well at Augusta with a T9. Gained 5 strokes putting. Maybe that's a spot we just kind of avoid. He has not had the best success here, and that might be putting it lightly. So, yeah, I mean, Homa, fingers crossed, maybe gets a little bit of steam off of one good week. But personally, no, I think it's fine to sit one out for Max Homa. There's a lot that kind of support that, not even just the spike in putting, but everything else. All right, going back down a little bit further. Let's see. Let's take a look at some of the good finishers. here. So just going down the board a little bit. Novak, we talked about. Hisasuni. We'll go down a little bit further. Bridgman talked about. Just seeing if anybody kind of catches my eye at all. Sami Välimäki, let's take a look at that really quick. Yeah, that's a pass. No, thank you. Anybody else? Smotherman might be forgotten. Let's see where he's looking at. Yeah, give me some Smotherman this week. Let me pull up the model again to look at where he's at. I mean, everyone was on board a couple weeks ago, and now he's priced down here. Let this load again. We got, yeah, Austin Smotherman, 6,300. Sign me up for that. That's fine. Outside of that, not many people really too interesting down here. Tony Finau shows up. I doubt his course history looks great, but let's see. Yeah. Not enough upside. I mean, he's kind of scraping around off the tees, not great, which could be a benefit this week, but not just not doing. He's not doing much very well. I mean, making some cuts, but that's not what we need here. Sung JM, Ricky Castillo, I could see that working out pretty well. Yeah, I'd still go back to him. A guy that we like quite a bit to start the year, 5th at the Cognizant Puerto Rico Open. He won, kind of had a bad stretch there, has had a couple weeks off. I'm willing to jump back on a little bit early for Ricky Castillo. We know he's not one of the longest hitters on tour. We go down here. Yeah, give me some Castillo. You can see how crooked he is too with the driver, but like this is a course where I think that can benefit some guys in a certain aspect, right? Where keep the driver in the bag. A place like Cognizant or the Valspar or something like that, you can cater to the course a little bit and tidy up these bigger misses. And now you're kind of playing position, and then your irons are kind of where you take it home. So I like that quite a bit. Outside of that, guys, I don't see a ton. As far as the cheap guys, let's see. Pearson Cootie comes back. Not great. Start of the year off fantastic and then just kind of fell off. So we'll pass on Cootie. And then Matt Wallace was the last one I wanted to look at really quickly. All over the place. I mean, I have some interest. He's an interesting one. I would argue he's got a lot of downside, but he has equally as high upside. Despite miscut, T18 here at this golf course. Irons were clicking last week. He putted well, a couple weeks ago at the Valero. Irons were clicking, made some putts, finished T2. So obviously a lot of the T2 is probably attributed to the putting. Outside of that, you'd be, maybe in the top 12. But yeah, I'm willing to give a shot to Matt Wallace. Anything else? Let's just look at like the last 8 weeks. If anybody stands out down here at the bottom. William Mao. Smotherman we talked about. Like I said, I think that's a great spot for Smotherman. Yeah, let's look at Mao. What's he been doing? Up and down. Pretty good showing at the Players. T6 at the Cognizant. Has not played here. Yeah, I'm willing to give a shot to give a try to William now. And I think that is pretty much it. Yeah. So like I said, everything is loaded. We'll have ownership in the field, lineups loaded to LineupIQ later today. Talked about this last week and the week prior. Whenever you would reserve your lineups on DraftKings, you can just hit this import entries, drop in your CSV, and it'll assign all the lineups, the entries that you're going to play. So then when you go to run your build and your lineups and sim them, it'll spit out the portfolio for each of those contests depending on the payouts and the size of the contest, etc. So a really easy way for you to use LineupIQ for building. You can copy in your player pool, which is nice. You click this here, apply your favorites. I only have 5 favorited right now. And you can run off of just your player pool, build your lineups and sim them. You can always go back and tweak it, add a new build, etc. But yeah, that was something added 2 weeks ago, which makes it really nice to load in your entries. Or even if you don't want to load them in, you can just toggle any of this. So, if you're playing the 250, you haven't played it yet. You're going to play 2 entries in the 250. Okay. We can take this one off. So now when we go to build one, we run our lineups and sim them, it'll simulate against the $250 field, which is pretty cool. So with that being said, guys, I think that is it. 36 minutes, not bad. So that is it. Check out fantasygolfbag.com. Appreciate everybody's support. And yeah, let's have a good week. Like I said, this is one of those weeks when we looked at like the course history or the course summary, I should say. The correlations are super strong in that 9 to 2 year window. Nothing wrong with recent form, but if you look through an entire model for an entire field of 80 guys, you kind of want to be fair to every player in the field and give yourself the best chance for having the proper player pool. So with that being said, guys, best of luck this week. Appreciate it. And we will check you out later. See ya.